So style definition, it's important to understand this style because the other two styles are going to be very similar, just changing a few things. Okay, so we're going to talk tempo and rhythm, harmony, melody, and orchestration. And then we'll do a step by step. So tempo and rhythm usually is going to use slow tempo without much rhythmic accompaniment. Mostly it will be like quarter or eighth notes. Tempo would range from 60 to 100, so it's going to be slow, and it can either be 3/4 or 4/4. So super simple. We will get to more complex styles as we progress through the course. So tempo, just basically slow, simple time signatures. That's basically it. And the type of subdivisions, meaning if it's a slow tempo, still the melody, it's not like we have on a slow tempo and we have melodies with 16th notes, which make it feel a little bit like a faster piece. The melodies are going to be half notes and quarter notes and maybe eighth notes and stuff like that. So it's going to be, everything is going to be very slow. Those are like the general rules. If you follow them to the T, then it's going to sound like the cliche style. And then, but feel free to modify them. And also another thing is, like, do not feel that you have to do everything that's in here. Like, you don't have to use everything that is in here. Just sometimes just one of these elements are gonna evoke that style a little bit. Sometimes we don't wanna sound 100% love, positive emotion. Sometimes we will need, depending on the context, the musical context, you may need a little bit of, love, positive emotions with a little bit of suspense. So it's gonna be about mixing certain elements from one style definition to the other, okay? So tempo and rhythm. Harmony is gonna be mostly in major modes, Ionian or Lydian. Mostly it's gonna use triads. Common extension is gonna be add ninth, 7th, 6th, sus4. This guy's got a ton of reverb. Well, I'll get rid of the reverb later. So triads. It's gonna be diatonic chord progressions most of the time. 4 that goes to 3. So resolved suspensions are common progressions: 9 to 8, 7 to 6, 6 to 5, 4 to 3. The ninth, added ninth. All right, so this is very common. So mostly he uses diatonic progressions. So we did and altered the scale degrees, such as flat 3, flat 6, and flat 7 are common. All right. So that's that in terms of harmony. There's more that you can do, and you can make it more complex. Melody mostly built around chord tones, and if we have non-chord tones, it's gonna be just very simple passing notes, neighbor tone, sometimes an appoggiatura, stuff like that. Counter melodies are frequent, usually introduced after the first presentation of the melody, and counter melodies will usually rhythmically contrast with the main melody just to create a little bit of separation. Melody, rhythm, and harmony. Now, orchestration. Usually I'm gonna say piano and strings and piano. If we just have strings and piano, that's a great starting point. We can enhance this, and for the bigger moments, it's gonna be more orchestrated. Let's talk about this real quick. So harmonies can be played either by the string section alone or a combination, the low strings, let's say viola, cello, and bass, or viola and cello if it's a smaller sound what we want, and some soft low brass, like trombones and tuba, maybe, or just trombones, or just maybe horns, and low woodwinds, bassoons and bass clarinet, or just bassoons, or just bassoons and clarinet in its low register if you want a smaller sound, right? So harmonies can also be enhanced with the arp, playing arpeggios, very common, helps a lot, and blends very well with the piano. If you're having something like, again, right, if you've got the arp doing, something like arp, do re ti do da do di do re ti do da do do, right? That sort of that's the trick. So you could enjoy my beautiful voice there. Harmonies can also be enhanced with the arp. The melody can be played either by lyrical solo instrument, so just like a solo woodwind, maybe a solo horn, the piano will work as well. So woodwind, horn, piano, violin, solo cello. Celesta is a good alternative as well. And so it's one option. Option B, a single string section, so the violin is 1, violin is 2, alto, the alto is the viola section, or the cello in its upper register, beautiful sound, very lyrical, expressive sound. So that option B is when, we can start with something small. If we start starting the cue with something small, then, we can have the strings and piano. Now, when we go a little bit bigger, right? When we go bigger, we can have the strings to the second time around, maybe, or whenever we can bring the strings, and that's creating a little bit of orchestration progression, and it's helping our music to evolve and not to keep locked onto that maybe 4, 8, 16 bar idea that we maybe sketched out, and that's a way for the music to evolve. So single string section by themselves, violin 1, 2, viola, cello. It can also be a combination of A and B. We can have maybe like a lyrical instrument, piano. This is a combination of A and B. Lyrical instrument will be piano and maybe violin 1, combination of A and B. And then if it's bigger, you can have multiple upper string section in unison, octaves or double octaves. So you can have violins 1 and 2 doing the same thing, or in octaves. It's gonna have a bigger sound, or double octaves. Maybe violins 1 DBC in octaves and violin 2 down an octave, or maybe violins 1, it's the higher octave, and then violins 2 in DBC, or we can have violins 1, violins 2, and violas, something like that. Octaves, unison, octaves, double octaves, and you can add high woodwinds to these options. So we have the strings in octaves or double octaves, and then we have woodwinds on top to add color or definition. And then calculus melodies played by the horn section is very common. Other frequently found option would be to include the English horn. You'll see right here in the counter melodies, to avoid conflict and create separation. One of the best ways to create separation is by using a different register, right? And so if we have the whatever it is performing the melody up here, the counter melody usually is going to be below the melody because we do not want to stand out too much. It's the second most important. It's maybe the second most important element, but it doesn't have to be more. It doesn't have to have more weight. It does not have to have more weight than the melody. So we're going to position it lower in the register, because lower in the register usually tends to not stand out that much. So we're going to choose instruments that feel comfortable performing in that register, and we've got the instruments that feel comfortable performing in that upper register. We're talking violins, flutes, oboes, maybe trumpets if it's like big. But for love, maybe you're talking strings and woods. We're talking violins, flutes, oboes. Maybe down here, we're going to be talking about those instruments that feel comfortable in the mid register, in the around the middle C sort of thing, and it's not the oboe, but the oboe can do it here. English horn will perform much better here. Maybe the clarinet, the countermelody is played by frequently found English horn, low register clarinets, viola, very nice here, the upper register cello, and all that, all right? Fast ones in the upper woodwinds and the upper strings can be added as background, flutter, or air candy. This, I'm talking less like the big moment, big, we can start big. It was like big emotional moment, or as the music progressed, starting is small, and then we got like full orchestra, all right? Cool, so that's that. Now, in an effort of simplifying the music composition concept, or sometimes even, for me, sometimes I feel stuck and I don't know where to start. And so I like thinking about music this way. 3 elements, I'll explain 5 elements, but if I think about these 3 elements, it unlocks a little bit the mental blocks, and it helps me just get started. And so I believe that music has at least 3 elements. Something that creates direction, something that creates movement, and something that's there in the background. We don't have to use the 3 elements at the same time. You can think elements, layers. You don't have to use them at the same time. Sometimes you find them all at the same time. So for now, just don't worry about these last 2. All these three elements, again, they don't need to be all the three together at the same time, but direction, movement, and background. Direction is whatever thing that moves us, the listener, from point A to point B. It's most of the times it may be a melody, but it can also be an increase on tempo. It's creating sonically it's moving us from this to this point to that other point. It can be an orchestral build. It can be harmonies that are more diatonic and more tonal to something darker. It can be a really long swell. It can be or a really long crescendo, something that creates direction. Usually we will associate this concept of direction to a melody, right? There's a second element that we find very often in music, is that something that creates movement, and we will usually associate that to rhythm. It can be rhythm, yeah, it can be an ostinato, it can be like a percussion rhythm, but it can be also something more subtle, like just a couple of two chords going back and forth. Yeah. We can associate that movement layer. It's a weird name, direction, movement. Musical terms to this would be the musical motor, or the ostinatos, or whatever thing that creates a sense of movement, of moving forward. But it's not something that starts here and ends there, like the element direction sort of thing, right? And so there's also something that is, and then there's the third element that I call background. Is that thing that's in the background that we don't really hear unless we pay close attention. But if we take it out, if we remove it, then it's like, oh, something is missing. It's that layer that gives support to everything else. It's the layer that sort of connects all the different elements, that sort of fills the gaps. And it doesn't always need to be there, but it sometimes is. Sometimes can be like a soft strings harmonic pad. Sometimes it can be just a clarinet long note, just sustained long pedal. It can be whatever. It's just something that is there in the background that fills the gaps and gives support to the rest of the musical elements that stand out. So that's that. And then I've got two other that I like having here. They are not as important, but enhancers, something that intensifies, augments. We're talking here anything that creates ear candy. Doesn't have to be there all the time, but sometimes all these elements that we're talking about, textural flourishes like runs, scales, trills, will be flattering, stuff like that. Okay, and it's like, if I don't know where to start, I'm just gonna start with something. I'm gonna start with something that creates movement, and then I'll start adding things on top. Okay, I'm gonna create a lower strings ostinato, boom, 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 and then depending on the style, I will start with something with one of these elements. Typically, depending on the style, I start with an element or with another element. For action mid-intensity, I usually start with something that creates movement, and I create the motor, and then on top I lay a few more elements. That makes it easy for me to create the style. For action high intensity, it's similar but it's slightly different. For love, we'll see the process. We'll move in a second to the next slide, and we'll see the process. But I wanted to explain this earlier. So I initially started with these two elements, and then mentally I thought, but what about this and that? So I added this one. So enhancers and bass. Bass is just sometimes we forget about the bass. Bass is super important. Bass could be in here, it could be in movement, it could be inside background, it could be inside direction, right? But I just put it there to so important dramatically, the dramatic effect that the bass can have, especially in like music for media, it's immense. And so I put it there just to remember, and even in my template, right, most of the bass instruments are routed to a separate stem because I need control over them, not because of the mix, not because later on when I'm exporting all these and when I'm mixing, I'm going to have more control, but also because they have such a dramatic effect that when I am mixing, I sometimes, depending if the music is for media, when the bass comes in, if it has a specific dramatic effect, then I make sure that they stand out, or it comes with enough weight or stuff like that. So bass, very important. You can read the definition. It's basically bass. All right, so let's get this started. So for this style, basically it's gonna be a slow, major chords, very simple melodies, diatonic notes that are in the chord, or maybe some passing tones, Initially, we're going to start with piano and the strings, and then we can evolve to something a little bit bigger, like violins with the melody, and maybe adding some woodwinds, color the sound, and having some support down there with the mid-lower strings and some mid-low brass. This style is very simple. This is the step-by-step that we're going to take. This is the step-by-step that I suggest. This is what we're going to do right now. The way I recommend doing this is set the right tempo, and then create the background. Or sometimes I prefer creating the background first, and sometimes I like, okay, maybe sometimes I go here, it's like, okay, this is gonna do a little bit like this. It's like cool, and then write it down. And then maybe I wrote the sketch and I already have the melody and the harmony. Or sometimes maybe I just have the harmony and I still don't know what I'm gonna write on top. But whatever it is, once you have either the sketch with the melody and the background, or maybe the background, in this case they like the harmonic background, then record the background in your sequencer. And I recommend having a sketch because sometimes it may get a little bit complicated depending on the tempo to do melody and background at the same time. Anyway, then record directions, write the melody and the counter melody if needed, and then we'll do the other layers.